Hello, everybody, and welcome into another season preview show here on the Hockey Writers YouTube channel. I'm your host, Matthew Zator, and we are up to the Tampa Bay Lightning as we get ready for the 2024-25 season. Got a couple writers that cover the Lightning here at the site. I got Jack Pallotta and Harrison Smajovits. Jack, how's it going? We're getting pretty close to the season as we're recording this. It's been a long off season. Not much has happened since free agency with a lot of teams, but how's it going?
Everything's been good. I just got back down to the Tampa Bay area a couple weeks ago, and season's right around the corner. I think roughly 40 days, and I'm looking forward to it.
Nice. And Harrison, how's it going?
Things are pretty good for me as well, Matthew. Thank you for asking. Relaxing as well, Dan. Sunny, well, not sunny right now. It's been actually raining quite a bit today. The other caveat of Florida, but itching for hockey. Gotta say that ever since the end of the Stanley Cup final.
For sure, and with the Lightning, they didn't go as far as they probably used to. They go a
That's
little
for sure.
further, right? So hopefully this season they'll get more than just a round, and we'll see. There are a lot of changes in the lineup, and we'll start. Let's go and just jump right in. I mean, the Lightning, of course, got kicked really early in the playoffs. The draft, not much to really talk about. They didn't have a lot of picks. I mean, they did get, you never know with the Lightning with their lower picks that could turn out in the future, but that's way down the road. So we'll talk about the current team, and I'll start with the forward group, which saw the big change everyone knows about. Steven Stamkos is gone. He is not going to be suiting up for the Lightning for the first time since he was drafted by the team way back long time ago now. And now he's with the Nashville Predators of all teams. I didn't expect him to sign with the Predators, but that's where he is. He's in the Western Conference. I have to deal with him a little more on this side in Vancouver than I used to. Just two times. Now it'll be four, I believe. I can't remember how many times they played the Nashville Predators, but yeah, it's going to be interesting to see him in another jersey. But yeah, let's start with that first one. Before we get to the new additions, I want your guys' thoughts on what that means for the Lightning. And Jack, I'll start with you. Stamkos being gone, I mean, is that a huge hole? And of course, we're going to talk about the guys that are going to be replacing him. But how big is this not having him this season?
Is this a hole that Stamkos is gone? Yes, but I definitely think it's not as big as a hole as the general public has made it out to be over the last few months. Obviously, Stamkos is getting up there in age, and he's no longer the player he was at all strengths, especially at 5-on-5. While he was effective on the best power play unit in the NHL last season, I think adding some new guys in his spot are going to benefit the team in the future and in the long run.
How about you, Harrison? I mean, you've covered the team for a while, and I mean, Stamkos is an icon. He leads almost every category you can look at in franchise history. It's a big presence. It's not going to be in the lineup anymore.
No, absolutely. And to say he's a presence is almost a bit of an understatement,
Yeah.
especially when had grown up in Tampa Bay. I remember the scene Stamkos back in 2008 and just how much hockey has grown since he got here. Like when he was first drafted in the Tampa Bay Times, it was at the back of the sports section. And by the time you get to when, I'm not kidding, it just shows. And
Yeah.
just but when you get to 2020, everything, like actually, let me just go back to 2015. All the big Lightning updates are front page news. Everyone's following them. The game has grown so much here, and it's very much in part to the impact that Steven Stamkos made here in Tampa Bay. And it's one of the reasons why I understand the sentiment as to why a lot of people are upset is because the face of the franchise is left. It leaves an emotional hole on the team. It leaves a leadership hole. Now, when it comes to adding guys like Guentzel, I think they definitely do fill that talent gap for sure. He's 5 years younger. He can produce well. I'm sure when he's on the same line as Nikita Kucherov, you can get even more out of him. But it's definitely going to sting a bit down here in the community, at least while Stamkos is still in the league. But at the same time, everyone wrote out Marty leaving, especially with how that went down with Yzerman in the Olympics.
Mhm.
They had to watch Vinny Lecavalier get cut. These things just happen in cycles, and it happens to be all three of them were the captain at some point
Yeah.
on the team. So The hole is going to be hard to fill from that perspective, but if you ask me truthfully, I do think in other ways the Lightning have improved as a team, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah, let's jump right into that. And Jack, starting with Jake Guentzel, I mean, that's a big addition. He's the one that's going to replace Stamkos in the top line, in the power play, all that stuff, coming over from the Carolina Hurricanes and previously the Pittsburgh Penguins. Signed to a big deal. What is his impact going to be in his first season here?
Jake Guentzel is one of the best all-around offensive talents I think we've seen in a little while and in recent years in the league. He had the narrative surrounded around his name being a line mate of Sidney Crosby's for a long time, from his upbringing to the AHL over to the NHL, that he wasn't able to perform or be that star player without him. However, once he got dealt to Carolina at the trade deadline last season, he really proved that he was a system-proof star in the league and a guy that could thrive in any environment, which is super valuable in my opinion, right? You look at a player like Jonathan Huberdeau, who had an 115-point season with the Florida Panthers and then struggled dearly in Calgary. And I think fans should be really excited for Jake Guentzel. He's extremely versatile, can create scoring chances in offense in absolutely any situation, whether it's on the rush, on the cycle, or the forecheck. And he's a perennial 5-on-5 goal scorer. He's ranked in the top 20 in 5-on-5 goals and points over the last 5 seasons amongst forwards. So I think he's an extremely valuable add to this team.
He's going to be here for a long time too. I signed him to a pretty big deal, and hopefully he produces that. But he's produced all his career, so I mean, I don't really think he's going to slow down. And he's playing with some pretty good players again, coming from Crosby. So Kucherov's a pretty good guy to be playing with too, and Braden Point as well. So to their other additions, they added Cam Atkinson, Zemgus Girgensons in the bottom six. I you know, Atkinson's an interesting one to me. I put him in my premium piece on the Substack as being a potential surprise free agent that just the money's nothing. I mean, whatever he does is going to be is going to be gravy, really. But I think he could return to what he was before. Jack, what do you think about that with Cam Atkinson? He's a guy that he's shown he can score in the league, but he's dealt with injuries lately, and like he had a 40-goal season, but that seems like a lifetime ago now. I do think he has something. Right now he's slotted in to be on the second line. So what do you think about him being added?
A little background, I actually met a guy over the summer who grew up with Cam Atkinson at Avon Old Farm. So it was nice to hear he had a lot of nice things to say about Atkinson's character, and I'm expecting him to fit well in this locker room. He's a really solid option off the rush. He obviously has been riddled with injuries in recent years, dealing with that neck injury 2 seasons ago, which put him out for the entire year, which was unfortunate to see. Is he suited for the second line right wing role? As of right now, probably not, but in John Cooper's system, arguably the best coach in the NHL, I think anything's possible. And if he can regain some of that speed he used to have and some of that 40-goal potential is untapped here with the Lightning, with a guy like Brendan Hagel, who really exploded on the scene and proved he can carry a line of his own last season. I think anything's possible. I think anywhere in the 30 to 50 point range is more than enough for the contract that he was giving, considering he's on a cost-effective deal of only $900K this upcoming year.
Like I say, that anything he does, if he scores just 10 goals, you're like, that's pretty good for what you're paying him. You're hoping that he goes more than that. But Harrison, what do you think about the forward group in general? I mean, you're looking at, they've got still a lot of firepower in that top six. The bottom six still looks good, in my opinion. I mean, really, Stamkos being gone, yeah, it's a big thing. But is this team still pretty good up front?
Yeah, I would agree that the firepower is still definitely going to be there. This is a team that was at one point at the top of the league in scoring. The defense was definitely their biggest issue last year. The offense is not something I'm necessarily worried about, even if it's Kucherov still responsible for half the goals like he was last year. Do the math. It's actually crazy when you look at it, but it's definitely enough that they should be able to make up for it on the offensive side.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, the thing is when you have a guy like Kucherov, he's going to add a lot to just having him on the team. And then Braden Point is probably one of my favorite players over the last few years, and he's just seems to be just keep getting better as he ages. So, yeah, I think it's still a pretty good team forward wise. All right, let's shift to the defense and saw some subtractions and additions as well. Another big name moved out, Mikhail Sergachev going to the Utah Hockey Club. Another surprising move I didn't see coming because he just signed that big long-term deal, but now he's in Utah. And they reacquired Ryan McDonagh from the Nashville Predators. So Harrison, what do you think about these defense with these replacements? I mean, you're looking at McDonagh, who's familiar with the system. He just basically just plug and play, put him back in is probably no problem. But losing Sergachev is a pretty big deal. Although they did get a really effective guy in JJ Mosier, who's had a really good since he was drafted. So, I mean, what do you think about the additions and the defense in general here?
So I actually really like the moves that were made on the defensive side. I will hate to admit that back in 2022, I was one of the proponents of saying they have to move off of McDonagh. I thought at the time, you have Hedman, you have Sergachev, you have some guys coming, you have Chernak. You should be able to overcome shedding his salary to get under the cap. I was very wrong. Almost instantly, you felt his absence on defense. So having him come back will be great. He was an alternate captain with the Lightning, so some of that leadership will come back in, which will definitely help with Stamkos on the way out. Sergachev, I definitely understand why they shipped him off to, well, Utah. I almost said Arizona, but
I've done it already.
it's going to be that way for at least another year. But so once I think the Lightning also kind of realized they might have overpaid Sergachev just a little bit. He did have a great first season as one of the top defensemen without McDonagh, but then he had the major drop off last season. They have to now be worried about the injury bug with him because he was out, he came back, and he had the big injury at Madison Square Garden. He fortunately was able to come back for a playoff game and make some kind of difference, but the Lightning, I guess, just didn't see it as enough to justify the $8 million cap hit, especially when the salary cap is still under 90 million. I think Mosier is going to make some kind of an impact. He was a 30-point guy in Arizona. So I think if you bring him to the Lightning, you should be able to elevate that even further.
Yeah, like I said, since he was drafted, like he made the NHL right away, and he's been a really solid guy on a team that's not very good, and he was their top defenseman. So I mean, and now he's going to be put in a role that's probably more suited to what he is right now, and not being forced into a ton of minutes. So I'm really excited to see how Mosier does on the Lightning. Jack, what about you with the new additions and this defense actually looks quite different when you're looking at these past few seasons, but I mean, still familiar faces when you're looking at who leads it and Victor Hedman, but there are some new guys that could potentially make a difference here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited for the defense's upcoming season. It's really deep. They have 8 NHL caliber defensemen, in my opinion. If you go down through the system, they had guys like Maxwell Crozier, Emil Lilleberg show that they were capable of playing NHL minutes last year. I'm super excited for JJ Mosier. I have a lot more to say about him once we get into our breakout picks. And obviously having Ryan McDonagh back is huge, not only just for the team overall, but for a guy who's struggled the past few seasons in Eric Chernak, who was paid a hefty contract following the cup runs. So
yeah, it's going to be interesting, especially with Mosier. So I won't talk too much more on him because there's more coming up. All right, goaltending, the same. It has not changed. The same starter, Andrei Vasilevskiy, who's going to start the season this time rather than being out injured, and Jonas Johansson, who is his backup, and he will be the backup to start rather than the starter. So, Harrison, not much to say on their goaltending. Vasilevskiy's one of the best in the NHL still. Is it still solid? Are you worried about Vasilevskiy this season in that? I mean, the injury didn't seem like he had problems with after when he came back. Took a bit of time for him to get back into the swing of things. But one question I will ask, because I ask this every year, I ask Jim on the every season preview. He needs to be reined in with his workload, though. Is that something that's going to happen this year, though?
No, that is absolutely true. And I think that his workload, and while I admire his work ethic greatly in his training, I think just how hard he pushed himself is why he ended up with the herniated disc in the first place. I don't think he is fully understanding yet. He's starting to push 30 now. The body's a bit different than when you're 21 or 22, just breaking into the league. It's why he's one of the best goalies in the world, but he needs to definitely tone it back if he wants to have more longevity. What I'm curious to see as well is just how he does with an extra off season of being able to just rep that back, get back into the normal training routine, because he missed all of preseason and the first 2 months. And then, while I understand it, John Cooper then pushed him as hard as he could have their star goaltender for 52 of the last 60 something games of the season, which you still saw a lot of that bright spots of greatness. You see a 15 game stretch where you'd have like a couple shutouts, a 915 to 925 save percentage, and then he would start to tire out. He'd give up like 5 goals in a game, 4 goals in a game. So within a lot of this, because he just didn't have that rest, and then he'd have to regroup, get going again. I think with a more normal routine that we have seen recent years, let's say 52 games, with this time over 82 as opposed to like 61, I think we'll see more of the usual Andrei Vasilevskiy that we've become accustomed to.
I think so too. Like he has to be really even though it seems like he's a machine. Once it with this, but the playoffs, how many games he started in the regular season, then the playoffs, and I mean, inevitably it was going to catch up to him. So I mean, they definitely got to keep him rested, and Johansson's got to play more games this season as the backup. So, but he has to be good, and that's the thing. He has to be good when he gets in, so that they feel confident in putting him in, and not just going with Vasilevskiy all the time. So we'll see. We'll see how that all plays out. All right, Jack, let's take a look at not the Central Division, at the Atlantic Division, which is really tough and has a lot of interesting teams in it, because you've got teams that are rising. You think will be rising when last season they didn't. You're looking at the Ottawa Senators, the Buffalo Sabres, who it seems like one of these seasons they're going to step forward and make the playoffs. You also got, of course, the main guys with Toronto, Boston, those types of teams. Where does the Lightning stack up with Stamkos gone, all these changes? Are they still in that mid-range where they kind of finished? Where do you see them in this division right now?
Now, I think this Atlantic Division is going to be roughly similar to last season. I definitely think the Lightning will find themselves back in the playoffs in the 2024-25 campaign. You got teams like Buffalo, Ottawa, Detroit, who are all trying to make the playoffs after some long droughts here. And while some of these moves that these teams made were solid, I don't really see them finishing above the Lightning just yet after a strong offseason, acquiring a guy like Jake Guentzel and bolstering the depth. I think the playoffs are wide open in terms of where 1 through 4 can finish, with the Panthers losing a couple defensive pieces, Boston moving on from Linus Ullmark. So I think it'll be really interesting. I think a lot of it also depends on how the top line plays. If they can potentially click as one of the best in the NHL with Guentzel, Point, and Kucherov, I think you could see the Lightning in the top 2 of the division. However, if they struggle and maybe Vasilevskiy has a little bit of wear and tear left from that injury, you could see them as low as 4. So ultimately a decently wide range of possibilities for the Lightning, but I am pretty confident they will find themselves back competing for Lord Stanley once again.
Harrison, do you agree with that? Is that where you see the Lightning as well?
More or less. I'm not sure if I necessarily see them in the top 1 or 2. I still think Florida is still pretty good. Toronto is a great, at least regular season team, and will find themselves at the top of the division. But I definitely 100% agree that the Lightning will be in at least the top 4 and back in the Stanley Cup playoff. I can certainly see, especially if Vazzy is back on, a lot of the younger talents able to come in and produce on offense and defense. And if some of those signings really work out, they can definitely find themselves back in the top 3 without having to be in a wild card spot.
Yeah, I see that too. I mean, I think they're talented enough that they're going to end up being in that top three and not being the wild card. Although they had to fight for it last season. But I think this year it just depends on if everyone stays healthy. And that's the biggest thing. And, Guentzel was out for a while last season too. So, I mean, hopefully he can stay healthy all year. Yeah, it all depends on that. There's always that question mark with every team. Injuries always seem to happen and screw things up. So, we'll see. We'll see how all the depth kind of steps in if that does happen. All right, let's go to our quick fire round, and these are just quick 1 or 2 sentence answers. And I'll start with you, Jack, and a biggest storyline question mark going into this season for the Lightning.
So my biggest question mark of the season, which I've spent a little bit of time writing about this summer, is does Jake Guentzel change the dynamic of this team offensively at 5-on-5? And for me, the answer is going to be yes. He showed he was able to play without Crosby with 25 points in 17 games over in Carolina last season after the trade. So I'm really excited for him.
All right, Harrison, what about you? Storyline.
And even though we kind of touched up on it already, I still think the biggest storyline is, are the Tampa Bay Lightning improved from last season? Just because the expectations are very high after back-to-back Stanley Cups, 3 straight trips to the Stanley Cup final. Steven Stamkos is now on the way out. They have to show that a lot of these offseason moves were for the better, because if they either take a step back or things are pretty stagnant, it's going to look pretty rough for Julian Breezeball and company.
Yeah, it is going to be interesting. I mean, whenever new guys come in, you don't know if they're going to fit in right away. And even if they do at all, because looking at Jonathan Huberdeau in Calgary, perfect example, doesn't fit. And it's interesting why it doesn't fit, but just doesn't. So hopefully Guentzel's not one of those guys that just can't fit. It doesn't seem like that's going to be. He came into Carolina, it was fine. So I think it'll be fine for him. All right, breakout stars. Jack, you said one. We know already here, but you can expand on that. 1 or 2 breakout stars of the Lightning this year.
Yeah, for me, it's JJ Moser. It has to be 24-year-old defenseman coming over from hefty minutes in Arizona last season, led the team in time on ice, also second in defensive zone start percentage over there. Had a career high of 30 points. I think he can expand on that. And who knows in this system? I mean, he proved he was a great rush defender last year, and maybe you compare that with Victor Hedman on the top line. So Hedman can keep taking those offensive risks and generating those high danger scoring chances. Another guy, maybe Nick Perbix as well, who kind of broke onto the scene pretty late from Minnesota, Duluth, and St. Cloud. So he's a pretty exciting guy. I think he's got a little more untapped potential in him.
Yeah, I like Perbix. I thought he was really good last season and could take a step forward depending on where he plays with the new guys. But Harrison, what about you? A breakout star.
So my breakout star, I'm doing it from a slightly different perspective because Mosier is 100% that type of candidate. I'm going to go with Max Crozier. We saw him for about 13 games last season, only had a couple assists, but really showed what he could do on defense. He wasn't afraid to throw his body out there to block the puck. I think with more playing time in the NHL, we might get some more of that offensive production we saw in the AHL. He had 21 points in about 49 games, just under a half a point a game, which for a defenseman is great. I think with enough development, we could start seeing that level of production. I think we'll start to see it over the course of this year.
Yeah, that's a good one too. We'll see where he kind of fits in with the team too, because he was pretty good last season when he did play. All right, the other side, a bounce back, and I'll stay with you, Harrison. Someone that needs to bounce back from last season.
I think the most glaring answer is none other than Andrei Vasilevskiy. If the Lightning do not have their star goaltending, I just don't think they're going to go anywhere. He's a guy who's going to play every single playoff game. If they should make the playoffs, because, no matter how good you are, there's never a guarantee. But even with the high power scoring, if they are not able to get the most out of their prize goalie, it's not going to be a fun season.
No, that definitely not, especially if they have to lean more on Johansson, which they wouldn't. They'll play Vasilevskiy even if he's not playing well. So, yeah, definitely. Jack, what about you?
Little of a under the radar pick here, but I have Connor Sheary, who Julian Breezeball signed as a free agent last summer. Signed him for $2 million across 3 seasons, and he was expected to come in and really be that secondary scoring punch with a ton of experience alongside some superstars like Ovechkin and Crosby throughout his career. Unfortunately, he suffered a couple injuries, wasn't really able to find his game. So I really hope we can see a good bounce back out of him and he can help bolster this secondary scoring heading into next season.
For sure, yeah. I mean, you thought. I mean, Sherry's been an interesting guy too. I mean, he plays in Pittsburgh. He had his best seasons because he played with Crosby, and Washington. I was kind of up and down. So yeah, he's definitely a guy that can do it. It's just will he be able to this season? And yeah, that'll be an interesting one. All right, X Factor. Now, this could be a player or it could be a situation. I didn't add that in. I was thinking X Factor could be both. So I'll throw that curveball in there if you wanted to touch on that. Jack, what about an X Factor this season? It can be player or situation.
I touched on this briefly when we were going over the defense, but for me, it's Eric Chernak. He struggled a ton once Ryan McDonagh was moved off this roster, and the defensive metrics took a massive dip downward. And I'm hoping that paired back with McDonagh, hopefully next season they can work as a shutdown pairing and can go out against the other team's top lines to give a guy like Victor Hedman more free range offensively. So he's on that hefty contract for the next 7-8 years, and that no movement clause kicks in after this summer, which means he's unmovable for the most part. So we're hoping that he could be the X factor this year and can sort of rebound defensively and be that shutdown guy in those tough minutes.
Yeah, I love Cernak. I always every time Canucks had they wanted defenseman, I always had Cernak as a target and for the Canucks. So yeah, I really like him. So hopefully we can do it too. I all right, let's talk some prospects, prospect. So Harrison, someone that could surprise and make the team out of camp this year?
So one guy that I really would like to see, and I think is very likely, could be AHL All-Star last year, Gage Goncalves. I'm just getting those numbers up for a moment. He had, and of course, now there's an issue here with my screen, but he had 58 points in 69 games, and he had 6 points in 7 games. It's very consistent with his numbers in 2022, 2023 as well. You're getting a guy who's getting closer and closer to averaging a point per game. He's not really someone who's going to give you a lot of goal scoring. He only had about 13 goals last season, but you'll get a lot of playmaking production. Over 40 of his points were on the assist. So I think you can bring him into that bottom 6 and give some more playmaker production to the offense. I think that could go a long way. And I think he's someone who's very capable of it, and that will help him break camp this year.
All right, we'll go further and now prospects that everyone should be watching beyond someone that can make the team, but that should be watching outside of the NHL.
So I'm going to go with 2 guys for this one. The first one is Connor Geekie, because he's part of that big trade for Mikhail Sergachev. He's a first-round pick from the Arizona Coyotes. He had some very stellar numbers in juniors. I don't know how long he might be in the AHL. He just signed his pro contract towards the end of last season. So it might be some time before he gets to the NHL, despite how highly he was picked. But just for the fact of the trade and where he was drafted, it's definitely something you want to keep your eye on when you check in on what's happening in Syracuse. Another guy that I'm very interested in seeing will be Dylan Duke. He is one of those mid-round picks for the Lightning. They're bread and butter the last couple of years. He's looked very good at the University of Michigan. He's also signed his entry-level deal. Again, someone that we might not see, at least for the good bulk of the start of the season, but I'm very curious to see how quickly he gets his footing in professional hockey.
Yeah, 2 great picks there. I mean, Geekie was Utah's top prospect. So I mean that's a guy that they felt comfortable moving to get Sergachev. So yeah, that's a big guy, and he's probably now the Lightning's top prospect in there. And Dylan Duke was before their top prospect. So there you go. All right, let's move to this could be an easy one, or maybe throw something in there because Stamkos not here, and also Kucherov's probably going to win this one. But Jack, who's going to lead the team in scoring on the forwards and defense?
I think the unanimous answer on forward is going to be Nikita Kucherov again. He sent a historic milestone, recording over 100 assists last year as a winger, which is very impressive. Did roughly 50% of the team's goal scoring, and he's so influential. One of the best passers in the game, can also shoot the puck. And yeah, and on defensively, got to be Victor Hedman
Oh
again,
yeah,
quarterback in that top power play unit, best in the league last year, operating around 30%, something like that. He still got his offensive game, produced well at all strengths. I'm excited for him to continue, and maybe a captaincy for him as well.
yeah, for sure. Harrison, is that what you got to, or you got to throw a curve?
Clearly, it's going to be. No, I'm kidding. It's obviously Nikita Kucherov, 100 assists, 144 points. He won the Art Ross last year. I think that's a foregone conclusion. Hedman's also likely the answer for the defense option. 76 points last year. You might not have realized it, but it was actually his second best offensive season of his career at 32 years old. And I believe his other one was 85. Both were better than the year he even won the Norris. So in his early 30s and in the second half of his career, he's starting to turn up the dial a bit on the offensive side. And I don't think anyone's going to be touching him on defense from offensive standpoints.
No, I don't think so either. I think Hedman's pretty safe. A pretty safe bet to be leading the defense. All right, let's finish the show with a bold prediction or a hot take for this season. I'll start with you, Jack. What do you got?
Might get a little bit of heat for this one, but I think it's pretty good. I got Jake Guentzel wins the Rocket Richard.
That's a good one.
Playing on that top line, that first power play unit. It's going to have opportunities. I think it's possible if Stamkos was able to score 40, 50 goals in an environment like this. I don't see why a guy like Guentzel wouldn't be able to as well. So
It's a good one. You're looking at like you guys said, Kucherov's the best passer in the game. He's going to be now feeding Guentzel, so yeah, he's definitely got a lot of chances. And if he can bury some, he's could get to that. Harrison, what about you? Bold prediction.
So my bold prediction, going back to Cam Atkinson, I think he's going to bounce back and have another 50-point season with this Lightning team. This is a bold prediction that's banking on his health a little bit, but I think he's going to be with some guys on a line that are going to really help with getting him back into the groove of things. I can totally see if he's fully healthy, you can get maybe 23 goals out of him and 27 assists to get to that 50-point mark.
Yeah, I think Atkinson can hit 20 goals on this team. He's got the talent. It's just he has to stay healthy, and that's going to be the biggest question mark. Can he stay healthy this season? And I think if he does, I think 20 goals is doable for sure. All right, before we finish, I know you mentioned it, Jack. Is he the captain this season, or do you have someone else in mind that could potentially be one instead? I mean, there are a couple other candidates.
I think it's got to be Victor Hedman. He's been the heart and soul of that back end for the last decade, and he just recently signed a 4-year extension with this Lightning team, and he's going to be most likely the new face of the franchise for the next couple of years. So I think he's the easy pick.
Harrison, do you agree with that?
Absolutely. He's been on this team 15 years already. The only person who had been on the team longer last season was Steven Stamkos, and that was just by one season. He has shown his leadership for a very long time. He's wore the A for a while. If you want to look at other candidates, like maybe Braden Point or Ryan McDonough, with all due respect to Nikita Kucherov, being the best player doesn't always mean you are going to be the best player on the team. Still very worthy of wearing the A, don't get me wrong, but I just think just with a gut reaction for most people. And it's almost a bit of a surprise they haven't already just gone and made the announcement.
Yeah. That's true. I'm really shocked that hasn't happened yet. He'll probably get named in training camp or something like that. Yeah, my first thought was Hedman, but Point would be my second one because he is that type of guy too. But maybe he's a bit too quiet for a leader. So I don't know. We'll see. I think Hedman will be the captain though. All right. Well, thanks, Jack Harrison, for coming on the show and talking the Lightning for this coming season. We'll see how it all goes with all the new additions, but still, I think it's going to be another exciting season for the Lightning. So make sure to check out everything that we have at thehockeywriters.com, our Substack, and the YouTube channel as we go through our previews and as the season goes on. Make sure to checking out everything on all of our platforms. But until our next preview, we'll see you next time.